I was putting on my coat to go to the reconciliation dinner at my sister's house. Then my lawyer texted, "Stop. It is a trap." What he showed me about her secret plan changed everything. My hand was already freezing on the brass handle of the heavy timber door. The Aspen wind was screaming around me, a solid white wall burying the world in ice. I was seconds away from the warmth, ready for the apology dinner my sister Michelle had practically begged me to attend. Then, my phone vibrated violently against my ribs. I glanced at the screen, expecting her to ask if I had parked. It was Mr. Henderson, my lawyer. The message was short, all caps, and terrifying. "Stop. Do not go in. It is a trap." I froze. The wind tore at my scarf, but I didn't feel the cold anymore. I only felt the ice in my veins as the next text loaded, detailing exactly how she planned to lock me away forever. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. Now, let me tell you how I walked into that house and burned it down. I didn't scream. The phone didn't slip from my frozen fingers. The panic that had gripped my throat a moment ago evaporated, replaced by a cold, metallic hum. It was the sound of my mind shifting gears from sister to architect, from victim to strategist. Michelle thought she lured a confused, fragile animal into a cage. She didn't realize she had just locked herself in a room with a bomb, and I was holding the detonator. Turning my back on the heavy timber door, I walked back to my rental SUV. I didn't run. Running looks like guilt. Running looks like fear. I walked with the steady, boring rhythm of a woman who had simply forgotten her purse. I opened the driver's side door, slid into the leather seat, and locked it. The silence inside was absolute. The storm raged against the glass, burying the world in white violence. But inside, the air was still. I didn't turn on the engine. I didn't need heat. I needed precision. I reached into the hidden compartment under the passenger seat. The waterproof envelope was there. This was Protocol Zero. I had prepared it 3 weeks ago, not because I knew about this specific trap, but because I knew Michelle. Unzipping my parka and my cashmere sweater, I exposed the thermal layer beneath. With hands that were steady as stone, I taped the envelope directly to my skin, right over my sternum. Inside was a 90-day hair follicle toxicology screen. Clean, 0 drugs, 0 alcohol, 0 interaction with the antipsychotics she claimed I was abusing. If they took my purse, if they took my coat, if they restrained me, the truth would still be taped to my chest. It was my armor. The Garmin InReach satellite messenger was next. Michelle had chosen this lodge for its isolation, a dead zone with no cell service. Perfect for making a sister disappear. She counted on silence. She didn't account for low-orbit satellites. I powered the device on. The screen glowed green. I punched in a sequence I had memorized. It sent a preset message to Mr. Henderson and the county sheriff. Status read. Location confirmed. Execute entry in 45 minutes. I watched the device ping. Message sent. The trap was now a stage. Finally, I picked up the burner phone, a cheap plastic flick phone I had bought with cash 2 towns over. I dialed the only number stored in its memory. It rang once. "Aunt Chloe?" Sophie's voice was a whisper, trembling so hard I could almost hear the vibration of her bones. "I'm in the driveway," I said. My voice wasn't warm. It was an anchor. "Is the acid in place?" "Yes," she breathed. "I switched the canisters in the pantry like you said." "But Mom she's pacing. She's staring at the clock. Dr. Sterling is mixing something in the kitchen. Aunt Chloe, I'm scared." "Fear is useless, Sophie. Put it away. You have a job. The tea service. Do not pour until I give the signal. Do you understand?" "I understand." I hung up. I sat there for 10 seconds, watching the snow bury the hood of my car. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I didn't look like a CEO about to execute a hostile takeover. I looked pale, small, and terrified. Perfect. I adjusted my scarf to hide the outline of the envelope on my chest, unlocked the car, and stepped back out into the blizzard. I wasn't walking into a family reunion. I was walking into a crime scene, and I was the one bringing the handcuffs. I watched the digital clock on the dashboard flick from 6:59 to 7 o'clock. 0 hour. For the last 5 years, I had convinced myself that my mind was a crumbling building. I thought the foundation was rotting. I thought I was the problem. The missing car keys that would vanish from the hook and reappear in the freezer. The important client emails I swore I sent that mysteriously vanished from my outbox, costing me contracts. The gas stove left hissing in the middle of the night. Every time I panicked, every time I cried in frustration, Michelle was there. She would put a hand on my shoulder, her face arranged in a mask of tragic pity. "Oh, Chloe," she would sigh, her voice dripping with that sickening, weaponized sweetness. "You're having one of your episodes again. It's okay. I'll clean it up. I always clean it up." I had believed her. I had swallowed her concern like it was medicine, never realizing it was poison. I let her convince me that my intelligence was a liability and she was the only one holding the walls up. But looking at the evidence Mr. Henderson had set to my screen, the emails between her and the transport service, the payment schedule for the doctor, the fog in my brain didn't just lift, it evaporated. I wasn't crazy. I was being demolished. Michelle didn't use fists to control me. She used pity. She destroyed my professional reputation not by screaming, but by sighing to the neighbors about how hard it was to care for a sister with special needs. She successfully diagnosed me with problems I didn't have, so she could prescribe herself as the cure. It's a dynamic psychologist called pathological altruism, but in my world, it was structural sabotage. She didn't want a sister. She wanted a patient. Because a patient can't inherit an $18 million estate. A patient can't run a design firm. A patient signs power of attorney over to her caretaker and thanks her for the privilege. I touched the cold glass of the car window. My anger wasn't hot anymore. It was geometric, precise. For years, I wondered why I felt so exhausted around her. Why her help always left me feeling smaller. Now I had the blueprint. My incompetence was her fuel. She needed me broken so she could feel whole. She had farmed me for sympathy the way a rancher farms cattle for meat. I opened the car door. The wind hit me again. But this time, I welcomed it. The confusion was gone. The guilt was gone. I wasn't walking into that lodge to prove I was sane. I was walking in to prove she was a fraud. Slamming the door shut, the sound was flat and final, like a gavel hitting a desk. I walked up the stone steps, wiped my boots, took a breath of the freezing air, and turned the handle. It was time to inspect the damage. The transition was violent. 1 second, I was in a white void of sub-zero wind. The next, I was suffocating in a wall of heat. I stepped inside, and the air hit me like a physical blow, thick, heavy, and smelling of cinnamon and expensive perfume. It was a smart home, temperature controlled to a tropical 75 degrees. To anyone else, it would have felt welcoming. To me, it felt like an incubator, a sterile, controlled environment designed to make bacteria grow. Michelle was waiting in the foyer. She was dressed in cream cashmere, looking every inch the benevolent matriarch. She didn't smile when she saw me. Instead, she offered a practiced theatrical tightening of the eyes that signaled deep concern. "Chloe," she breathed. She didn't hug me. She reached out and gripped my upper arms, her fingers digging into the wool of my coat. It wasn't an embrace. It was a frisk. She held me at arm's length, scanning my face with a medical intensity. "Look at you. You're shaking." I wasn't shaking. I was perfectly still. But I knew the script. "It's just the cold, Michelle," I said, keeping my voice small. "The walk from the car." "No, look at your pupils," she interrupted, turning my face toward the chandelier light. "They're dilated. Are you taking the medication Dr. Eris prescribed? Or did you forget again?" There it was, the opening move, establishing my incompetence before I even took off my coat. "I think I took it," I stammered, looking at the floor. "I've been so confused lately." A flash of satisfaction crossed her face, quick and sharp as a scalpel. "I know, sweetie. I know. That's why we're here." She let go of me and walked past me to the front door. She grabbed the heavy iron deadbolt and slid it home with a loud final thud. Then she engaged the electronic keypad lock. "The storm," she said, not looking at me. "The news said it's going to be a whiteout. We don't want the doors blowing open. We're safe now. No one comes in, no one goes out." She typed a code. Beep, beep, beep. Lock. I watched her fingers. She thought she was locking me in. She didn't realize she was locking the witnesses out. "Come," she commanded, her voice dropping to a soothing coo. "We have a guest, an old friend from the wellness retreat. He just happened to be in town." I followed her into the great room. The fire was roaring in the stone hearth. Too big, too hot. Standing by the mantel was a man who looked less like a doctor and more like a bouncer in a blazer. He was thick-set, sweating slightly in the overheated room. "Chloe, this is Dr. Sterling," Michelle said. He stepped forward, extending a hand that looked like a catcher's mitt. He didn't smile with his eyes. He assessed me. It was a clinical, predatory calculation. He wasn't looking at a person. He was looking at a payload. "Michelle has told me so much about you, Chloe," he said. His voice was heavy, like wet gravel. "I understand you've been having a hard time distinguishing reality lately." I took his hand. It was damp. "I just want to get better," I whispered, pulling my hand away quickly, playing the part of the fragile, broken sister. "And you will," Sterling said, exchanging a look with Michelle. "We have a very aggressive treatment plan ready for you tonight." Michelle placed a hand on the small of my back and pushed me, gently but firmly, toward the seating area. "Sit," she said. "It's a special winter blend. It will help with the shakes." I sat. I kept my coat on, hugging it tight around me, checking the pressure of the envelope against my chest. The trap was set. The players were on stage. "I'd love some tea," I said. "I'm dying of thirst." The living room felt like a courtroom where the verdict had already been decided. I sat in the high-backed leather chair, shivering theatrically, pulling my coat tighter. Across from me, Michelle perched on the edge of the sofa, watching me with the unblinking intensity of a hawk circling a field mouse. Dr. Sterling paced the rug, his heavy shoes sinking into the expensive wall. "You see, Chloe," Sterling began, his voice dropping to a practiced, clinical baritone. "What you're experiencing, the confusion, the lost time, the belief that people are plotting against you, it has a name. We call it persecutory delusion. It's a hallmark of a manic episode." He wasn't yelling. He was doing something far worse. He was dismantling my reality with calm, professional vocabulary. He was rewriting my history, turning my suspicion into a symptom and my valid anger into a disease. "I'm not manic," I whispered, staring at my boots. I lose my keys. I forget things." "Exactly," Michelle chimed in, her voice dripping with sad vindication. "You forget things, sweetie. You forget conversations. You forget reality. Remember the stove? You swore you turned it off. But you didn't. I had to save us." For 5 years, those words would have broken me. They would have made me cry, apologize, and beg for her forgiveness. But tonight, I felt something hard and flat pressed against my sternum. I slipped my hand inside my coat, pretending to seek warmth, and my fingers grazed the outline of the waterproof envelope. The anchor of sanity. Sterling was droning on about chemical imbalances and involuntary commitment for my own safety. He was spinning a web of lies so thick it could choke a person. But under my hand was a piece of paper, a 90-day toxicology screen, a scientific time-stamped document that proved my blood was clean, my mind was clear, and my body was sober. He called me broken. I touched the paper. It was my anchor. For the first time in years, I knew mathematically, legally, biologically that I was the same one in the room. I wasn't floating in their gaslight anymore. I was standing on concrete. "Here's Sophie," Michelle said, her eyes lighting up. Finally. Sophie entered from the kitchen. She held a heavy silver tray with trembling hands. On it was a steaming porcelain teapot and 4 cups. The smell of cinnamon and cloves filled the suffocating air. "The winter blend," Michelle announced, sitting back. "It's a family recipe. It will calm your nerves, Chloe." Dr. Sterling suggested it. I looked at Sophie. She was pale, her eyes wide and terrified. She looked like a child about to drop a plate. But as she set the tray down on the low coffee table between us, she caught my eye. Just for a fraction of a second. A micro nod. The asset was active. "Pour it, Sophie," Michelle commanded, waving a hand dismissively. "Chloe first. She needs it." She stepped between Michelle and the table, her body effectively blocking Michelle's line of sight to the tray. It was a clumsy movement, typical of a nervous teenager, or so it seemed. I watched her hands. They weren't trembling anymore. They were fast. She poured a cup from the pot. Then, with a sleight of hand that would have made a magician proud, she shifted the saucer. She didn't just pour tea. She rotated the entire serving order. The cup that was pre-dosed, the one meant to knock me out within minutes, slid silently to the right. The clean cup slid to the left. "Here, Aunt Chloe," Sophie said, her voice cracking slightly as she handed me the clean cup. "And for you, Mom," she said, handing Michelle the cup that was meant to end my life. Michelle took it without looking. She was too busy staring at me, waiting for her victory. "Drink, Chloe," Michelle said softly, raising her own cup. "To family, and to getting you the help you need." I wrapped my hands around the warm porcelain. I wasn't holding tea. I was holding justice. Michelle set her empty cup down on the coaster with a delicate clink. She smoothed her cashmere lapels, took a deep breath, and began the performance she had likely rehearsed in the mirror for weeks. "Chloe," she started, her voice trembling with manufactured emotion, "we're doing this because we love you. You know that, right? We can't watch you destroy yourself anymore. The wandering, the confusion, the outbursts, it's breaking my heart." She reached under the coffee table and pulled out a thick blue folder. She slid it across the mahogany surface until it rested against my teacup. "Dr. Sterling has a facility in Switzerland," she said, tapping the cover. "It's beautiful, peaceful. You'll be safe there. You won't have to worry about money or the estate or running the company. I'll take that burden off your shoulders. I've already prepared the paperwork." I looked down at the document. The bold letters at the top screamed in legal black and white, "Emergency conservatorship order, incapacitated adult." It wasn't a treatment plan. It was a life sentence. "I don't want to go away," I stammered, letting my voice crack. I wrapped my hands tighter around my cup, mimicking the desperation of a trapped animal. "It's not up to you anymore, sweetie," Michelle said, her voice hardening just a fraction. "Dr. Sterling has already signed the medical necessity forms. If you don't sign this voluntarily, he can have you sedated and transported involuntarily, for your own safety." She nodded at my cup. "Drink your tea. It will help you accept it." I lifted the porcelain to my lips. Over the rim, I watched her. She was leaning forward, her eyes locked on my throat, hungry for the swallow. I took a sip. The tea was warm, spiced with cinnamon and cloves. It tasted like Christmas. It tasted like victory. "It's good," I whispered. "Good," Michelle smiled. She lifted her own cup again, bottoms up. She drained it. I watched the liquid, laced with enough sedatives to drop a horse, slide down her throat. Then we waited. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the distant howling of the blizzard against the locked doors. Michelle checked her Cartier watch. Dr. Sterling adjusted his cuffs, looking bored. They were waiting for the slump, the slur, the crash. 1 minute passed, 2 minutes. Michelle frowned. She looked at me, expecting to see my eyelids drooping. I widened them instead. I took another calm, steady sip of my tea. 3 minutes. Michelle blinked. Her head gave a small, involuntary jerk to the left. She reached for the teapot to pour more, but her hand missed the handle by 2 inches. "That's strange," I said. My voice wasn't trembling anymore. It was clear, cold, resonant. I should be unconscious by now, right, doctor? The room froze. Dr. Sterling's head snapped up. Michelle tried to focus on me, but her eyes were starting to drift independently of each other. What? She mumbled. Her tongue felt heavy in her mouth. What did you say? The sedative, I said, leaning forward. Dr. Sterling uses a potent blend, ketamine and benzodiazepines, isn't it? Rapid onset. Usually takes about 3 minutes to strip a person of their motor functions. Shh, Chloe, she gargled, fighting the paralysis. Fam. There it was. The final card, the one she had played against me since our parents died. The biological trump card that was supposed to excuse the theft, the gaslighting, and the cruelty. I looked at her, really looked at her for the last time. I saw the lines of calculation around her eyes, now slack. I saw the hands that had stolen my sanity, now useless. You're right, Michelle, I said softly. We are family. We share the same DNA. But you know what else shares my DNA? Cancer. Her eyes widened, panicked, and wet. Cancer is biological, Michelle. It grows from your own cells. It feeds on your blood. But that doesn't mean you keep it. You don't negotiate with a tumor. You don't try to love it into being benign. You cut it out. Standing over her, I blocked the light. This isn't betrayal. I'm not doing this because I hate you. I'm doing this because I want to live. This is surgery, and I am finally cutting you out to save the rest of the body. Outside, the red and blue lights pulsing through the snow grew brighter, washing the room in the violent colors of the law. The heavy timber doors didn't open. They exploded inward. Sheriff Miller led the way, stepping through the splintered wood, his breath pluming in the sudden rush of cold air. Deputies swarmed the room, their boots tracking snow onto the pristine floors Michelle had tried so hard to protect. They found Sterling trying to hide in the kitchen pantry. He came out in cuffs, weeping about his medical license. They lifted Michelle onto a stretcher. She couldn't walk, so they carried her out like luggage. As they strapped her down, her eyes found mine one last time. There was no anger left in them, only the terrifying emptiness of a narcissist who has lost her audience. I watched them load her into the back of an ambulance, not for a medical emergency, but for transport to the county lockup. The siren wailed, a lonely sound that was quickly swallowed by the wind. Sophie walked up beside me. She was holding her coat, shivering, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking at the horizon. Is it over? She whispered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened the digital memory journal app, the one Michelle had forced me to use to record my lapses in sanity. I selected all files. I hit delete. Yes, I said, taking Sophie's hand. It's over. We stepped out onto the porch. The storm was breaking. The wind had died down, leaving behind a silence so deep it felt holy. The air was biting and cold, but it didn't hurt anymore. It felt clean. It felt like the truth. Family isn't who you bleed with. It's who you bleed for. There is a difference between a support system and a parasite, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is learn to tell them apart. If you have ever had to perform surgery on your own life to survive, if you have ever had to cut a toxic tie to save your sanity, share this story. You are not broken. You are not crazy. You are a survivor, and your life belongs to you again.